I hesitate to say legitimacy, but I think it's losing its standard. It's no longer, when people think of the Security Council, I think people no longer view it as the authority that it once was. It's maybe losing its importance, particularly when it's silent on situations in Syria, when national interests stop the Security Council passing resolutions on invasions in the Ukraine, for example. So when it stays silent on major issues like that, then people will question, well, what's the importance of the Security Council?
Yes.
Given the competence and the lack of political will, is a possible halfway house a screening body that doesn't bind the Security Council, but that runs through has every Security Council resolution run through it, and then says, yes, I think this is compliant with these norms, or no, I don't think it is. Much like the standing committee in the UK that runs legislation through it, and Parliament can still pass the legislation, but everyone then knows that there's a public document and a committee said, well, we think the legislation is problematic for reasons ABC. Is that a lot easier to get through, and would it publicise the rule of law problems?
Yes, I think it would be an alternative. It could, certainly you could have some sort of mechanism that screens, but I mean, whether it's a judicial body or whether it's a screening mechanism, there needs to be some sort of, I think, intermediary that can review or monitor the decisions of the Security Council, whether it then has the power to bind the Security Council to make substantive changes, or whether it's simply as advisory opinions saying you could improve this way or you could improve this way. Both, in my opinion, would be beneficial for the Security Council. They would be a step forward. I think it's more likely that there will be an advisory body or a screening mechanism than there would for the Security Council to essentially say, yes, we're going to create an independent tribunal that deals exclusively with us and tells us what to do. And I see that as being problematic in some ways too, because it could also alter the trajectory of Security Council decisions. So it could mean that the Security Council is unable to respond as effectively or quickly to threats to the international peace.
Cause the slow.
Yeah, but in the same way that calls for expansion of the Security Council to 24 members need to be seen within that, the urgency with which the Security Council acts. So the Security Council doesn't have, like Parliament, recesses, and it operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. And it can be called, and it has been called, on public holidays, halfway through the night. It works at all times because of the nature of the urgency of the work that it does. But I think that is belittled by the fact that it, in many cases, and many high-profile cases, has failed in its duty to maintain international peace and security.
I'm going to take liberty as chair to ask you a question I've been waiting to ask, but I think the discussion we're having has really helped sort of give shape to this. What do you think is the possibility of having the ICJ take on this function, given that it does issue advisory opinions and you already have the consensus of the states, and so there's not going to be the kind of disputing the jurisdiction of this body. We already know how hard it is to get states to sign on to a new statute, as we've seen with resistance to the ICC, for example. So is there any scope, you think, for the ICJ taking this on, or do you think that body has its own baggage and that's why it wouldn't be suited to this role?
I think it can. I don't think it wants to. It has, the Security Council, if it wanted to, and again this goes back to political will, which is the eternal struggle. If it wanted to, the Security Council could say to the ICJ, we would like you to issue an advisory opinion on the legality of X, Y, and Z. But it doesn't, because it doesn't seem to want that intervention. So the ICJ has no power to force the Security Council under its authority.
But other states could go and file for such an advisory opinion.
But the ICJ jurisdiction is interstate, and so I'm not sure that it would find jurisdiction in taking the UN to, a state would find, or the ICJ would find that it has standing to rule in a case between the Security Council or the members of the Security Council and another state. So I think that that is problematic. But more, I mean, of course, you could have one state taking another state, but then you would have, I think, quite a hard time trying to prove that this particular state is at fault or is the reason why whatever has happened, the consequences that took place happened. So states have, or individuals have tried to do it before with the member states of NATO, so in Yugoslavia, and I think I mentioned as well recently with Libya, there's no way that these states can be taken or held accountable for the actions of that are carried out in the process of their duties under NATO or under regional mechanisms.
Right, I see that we've reached our time with the seminar. I'd like to thank all of you for your participation and of course invite you all to join me to thank Sharif for his presentation. Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
You feeling better?
Yes.
That's okay.
No, I heard from Sharif.
Yeah, I always come 100 times. So no, yeah.
When's the due date?
Next week.
Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah, just waiting.
You're excited.
Yeah.
He's terrified.
You must be more terrified than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Lynette.
I feel like I didn't answer your question.